your host, Sean Lynn, in the pub for a dram with friends, where we talk about faith, family, food, and fun. Pull up a chair and I'll pour you a drink. Episode 44. We welcome Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers into the pub, where he will talk about his life in law enforcement and service to the church. Sit back as I pour us a dram. I hope you are enjoying a dram with friends. Please like, subscribe, follow us on Heroic Men YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. Please continue to pray for our mission or go to godsquad.ca to donate. All whiskeys are purchased by myself for use in the pub. Thank you as we continue with our episode. Welcome to another episode of A Dram with Friends. We are extremely blessed to have a friend join us in the pub from down south. Welcome, Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers.
Hey, welcome. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
So I'm going to pour myself a dram of some Larceny bourbon. I figured I'd get some U.S. whiskey in here. Dram's only 1/8 of an ounce, so it's not a lot of whiskey. And after working 4 night shifts at the Stampede, I think I need one. So who is Deacon Harold for our friends in the pub?
Yeah, so I'm a Catholic evangelist, speaker, and author. I live in Portland, Oregon, in the United States, and I've been ordained a deacon now 19 years, married with 4 kids, and I'm in Immaculate Heart Catholic Church in Portland, where I served there ever since I've been ordained. So yeah, it's a good life. I was a law enforcement for 23 years before leaving in 2012 to speak and to write full time. Wow. And so that's the short of it.
Wow. So how long were you in law enforcement, did you say?
23 years. Wow,
that's hats off to you. And I'm a month away from starting my 33rd year, so I almost have 32 full in. And yeah, it's an interesting journey, and obviously during that time you became ordained as a deacon. How did that come about?
Yeah, so in my when I was a kid, I thought I had a call to the priesthood, and I went to a Benedictine high school run by Benedictine monks, and they had a come and see program, which I did all 4 years of high school, and thought I had a vocation to monastic life, and so I went off to college and then graduated and worked for a year and then joined the monastery and thought, this is it. I'm doing everything God wants me to do. And ended up not staying in the monastery, but meeting my wife and then moving out to Oregon, but still feeling that pull, that tug, that attraction. And that eventually led me to the diaconate. I was accepted into the program in 1996. And there was no class that year, so I had to wait a year for the next cohort to start. And it's a 5-year process, including a master's degree in theology. Wow. So 97 to 2002 when I was ordained. And so that call, that attraction never left. And it was something that was actually nurtured, I think, in Eucharistic adoration as well. Sitting before the Lord and saying, what do you want from me? There's something here. What is it? How can I do your will? And I remember specifically when I was getting ready to leave my job to speak and to write full time, I said, to leave an entire career to go talk about Jesus wasn't an easy decision. I remember thinking, saying, Lord, I'm a clean slate, draw all over me. And just allowing him to use me for his will. And that's scary, but there's also nothing more rewarding.
That's awesome. So you went from discerning the priesthood to law enforcement. How'd that happen?
Yeah, so back when I went to college, most colleges in the United States have police departments. And back when I was in college, the school that I went to was University of Notre Dame. And the only full scholarships they gave at that time were for athletes and graduate students. And so I had a academic scholarship, but I had to work also part of the time. And so I ended up working for the police department. And I worked there my sophomore, junior, and senior year as a kind of like an intern. And then I got hired full time after graduation. I was offered the job during my senior year and accepted the job because I think this would be great to stay here and as I discern monastic life. And so it just seemed natural that when I left the monastery to get back into law enforcement again, which I did. And when I left, I was the chief at the University of Portland, here in Portland, Oregon. Wow. So I was there from 2001 to 2012, and then I left June 30th, 2012 was my last day. And my area of expertise was violence, risk, and threat assessment. So after 9/11, I was the president of the of the Western Association of Campus Law Enforcement Administrators. And the International Association sent all of the regional presidents to FLETC, to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Glencoe, Georgia, where we received training in threat assessment, so assessing threats post 9/11. I got really good at it, and so I ended up going to Quantico, the FBI Academy, and taking an advanced class in threat assessment. I ended up teaching a class at the Police Academy called Contemporary Threat Assessment Methodology. So I was teaching police officers and first responders how to identify and respond to threats of terrorism. And I got good at that. And so I was approached by private businesses, school districts, universities to do what's called target hardening. So I would evaluate their processes and procedures and methods to help them become harder targets against violence and terrorism. And that's what I was doing up until I left in 2012.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm familiar with a lot of that type of work because I was a community liaison officer. I was on our public safety unit, so our riot squad. I did that for 17 years. So we studied a lot of different areas, including how Seattle and those did their riots back in the day because we hosted G8. And so we've done lots of fun stuff over the years. And it's definitely an interesting field to go in. I'm in the high schools now, and I'm actually looking at Safe Oregon and what they do for student tip lines down there as a model that maybe we can bring up here. So that's awesome. So,
wonderful.
How did you find balancing your Catholic identity in the world of law enforcement and professionalism and stuff like that, leadership?
Well, as you know, in the law enforcement community, the faith of the officers is few and far between, to be honest. I mean, we have high divorce rates, suicide, alcoholism, things like that are quite high in the law enforcement community. And it's particularly tough these days, at least the United States and law enforcement, with everything going on with race relations and all of that. So it's tough. And, faith in my life always played an important role. So I can never divorce myself from my faith. I think for me, what I tried to do, especially when I was a chief, was to impart the values of the faith into how we interacted with our with perpetrators and with our community. So, for example, I remember always treating people with dignity and respect, right? So I remember one time we were dealing with an individual who was homeless and kind of schizophrenic, kind of acting, and instead of throwing him to the ground and cuffing him, I said, wait a minute, I tried to engage him in conversation and, just listened to him, because often people just want to be listened to, and we were able to diffuse that situation. I remember one time in particular, we had an individual sitting in their car, And obviously the guy was homeless, had all his stuff in his car, and a student called us and told us. So we went out and talked to the guy, and they brought him to my office, and I said, before you come in here, I need my office to search your bag to make sure you don't have any weapons or anything. He said, no problem, please. And so we're looking through his bag, and the officer pulls out this stack of cards, and the stack of cards had these drawings on, so these pencil drawing, hand drawings, very well done, like professional quality. And I said, wow, where'd you get these? He goes, oh, those are mine. I drew them. I said, get out of here, man. You ain't draw that. He said, no, seriously. I drew that. I said, you did this? And he goes, yeah. I said, wait a minute, back up. Tell me your story. What's going on with you, man? So he told me a story. He had lost his job and lost his house, was living with his brother. There was some dispute between him and his brother, and brother kicked him out, so he was living in his car. And he was at the university because he is a soccer fan. He actually had tickets to the women's soccer match that was later that afternoon. And so he was just waiting in the car to the soccer match. He was very genteel, he great personality. I'm like, wow. And so I called as a deacon. I put my deacon hat on. I called and was able to get him resources, a place to stay, shower, food, all that kind of stuff. And in fact, I even commissioned artwork from him. Wow. I was so impressed with what he did. I actually paid him to do a larger drawing of me, which I framed and put on my wall at work. And when anybody asked me about it, I told them the story. I said, this is why we treat people the way we do. Because you never know, someone's story. You walk a mile in their shoes and appreciate the fact that sometimes good things can happen when you treat people with respect. In fact, I'll pull it up right here. I think I got the photo on my phone because I think I took a picture of it to show. Oh, here it is right here. So here, I don't know if you probably can't see that, but that's the picture. Look at that. Isn't that awesome?
That is.
Because I was a monk, I asked him to draw like a kind of a French or Italian scene, kind of with the monastery at the top. He just drew that out of his head. It took him, I think, a couple of weeks, but he came back to the office and brought it to me, and I paid him. And it was a beautiful exchange of joy because he gave me the picture, which I was so thrilled to get. And then I gave him the money, which he was thrilled to get. And so it was a beautiful relationship. And we kept in touch until I left. We stayed in touch. And he kept coming to the soccer games. I would always greet him. My officers would always greet him. It was just that's the stuff, man. That's where we roll up our sleeves, and get our hands dirty in the Lord's vineyard. That's the stuff right there.
Well, and you talk about the dignity of the human person, and that's what I try to tell my coworkers, and I've spent a career. I learned as a young officer. I was just explaining this story to a guy last night at work that it was a woman with a biker gang. She was with the sergeant at arms, and he had assaulted her, but wasn't cooperative. But the way I treated her, she ended up coming back to me and divulging a bunch of information. I got to take 4 truckloads of property out of the guy's house and arrest him and all the good stuff. But that gave me an indication that it's how you treat these people and look at them and that dignity of the human person and the face of Jesus in everyone you meet. And sometimes it's really difficult to find that. But it gives you a baseline to work from. And you talk about dealing with individuals like that. Here in the Calgary Police Service, we've started a bunch of programs. We've got police officers working with mental health professional nurses and going out and dealing with the issues rather than just continuing it. And I was part of a couple programs setting them up, youth at risk development, where I was working one-on-one with youth at risk of falling into gangs and getting to know their stories and talk to them and walk with them. And it's an awesome opportunity that I wish I challenge the men that I deal with at the God Squad and stuff to just look at that young person and try and understand where they are rather than that punk down the street, right?
Exactly right. I tell the same thing when I give talks to school teachers. You never know that one kid that you think, oh man, this kid, he has nothing going for him. He's just a pain in the butt. But you don't know what that kid has going on at home. You don't know what kind of issues and words of encouragement can completely change that kid's life. Because I was that kid. I grew up in a house where my parents had a horrific marriage. They ended up eventually getting divorced. And, that you carry that stuff with you as a kid. And I remember my very first grade in high school. It was a history class. I was a freshman in high school. Mr. Frank Mullen was the teacher. And when Mr. Mullen gave back his test papers, he would walk up and down the aisles. He would turn your test paper over on your desk, and he would continue up the aisle and down the next aisle and up the next aisle. And so he got to me, and I'm nervous. I know I studied. I said, I hope I did okay. And he turned the paper over and he kept going. And I turned it over. I looked at it. It said B+. I'm like, yeah. I audibly said, yes, just like that. And Mr. Mullins stopped. I'll never forget this as long as I live. He stopped and he backed up and he looked me right in the face and he said, and you're happy with that? And I remember looking at him thinking to myself, yeah, I got a B. That's pretty good, But it was only later I realized what he really meant was, you can do better than that.
Yeah,
you can do. And it was the first time, but besides my mom, right, that anybody challenged me, or pushed me, or encouraged me, or even thought that I could be more or do more. And that changed everything for me. And I ended up becoming the very first person in the history of my family ever to go to college.
Wow.
And then now I'm doing the things that I'm doing now because of men in my life that didn't take my father's place, but showed me, how men are called to serve, protect, and defend, to live their spirituality from the cross of Jesus Christ. To have men like that in your life is extremely important. That's why so many young men, and you've seen this in law enforcement, so many young people, men and women, that don't have fathers at home often get involved in gangs because they're looking for that male father figure who's not there in the home. They can't find it in the community, so they go to the gangs.
Yep.
That's what they're looking for. They're looking for not just a sense of community and belonging, but they're looking for other men to be father figures for them. That's the way they think they can find it, which of course is disastrous.
Yep. Yeah, they're looking for that approval from an older male, and in the gang, they're willing to do anything to get that, and that's where we have to do that in our churches. Because I remember challenging. I'm sure you're familiar with Call to Protect it in the churches. So this was a Western Canada conference for all the diocese leaders in that area, and I was giving a talk about working with youth at risk, and I said, okay, you tell these young people that God loves them and has an amazing plan for them and wants them in the church. Now, which church do I send them to? What church is going to greet them, accept them, and invite them into that journey? And that's where I think as churches we fall short, especially my experience up here is we need to do a better job of inviting people into our church, especially our young people.
No, I think you hit the nail right on the head. And what are we inviting them to? What is God inviting all of us to? He's inviting us to share life with him. He's inviting us into a relationship of intimate, personal, loving, and life-giving communion. That's what we're invited to. And that is not just good news, because we have to talk about the gospel, evangelium. The word gospel means good news. But actually, it's more than good news. It's life-changing news. Why? Because the encounter with Christ can change your life. And that's what we're inviting people to. We're inviting them into a relationship where Christ can truly come into their life and they can fully become the person who God created them to be. There's a phrase in theology called teleology. And so what that means is that we believe that life has a purpose. There's a meaning behind everything. Whereas the culture with its atheist attitude, there is no purpose for anything. So two very different, diametrically opposed ways of thinking and approaching life. One leads to nothing, and one leads to the fullness of joy and peace in that deep relationship with the Lord. And that's what we have to do. And I agree with you 100%. We have to do a much better job inviting people into that relationship. And the problem I think we face in the Catholic Church is, first of all, fear and trepidation of doing that, because a lot of us don't know our faith very well. Let's be real.
Yep.
As Catholic, I mean, someone can tell you to score the latest, ice hockey match, or they can tell you all the names of the people on this baseball team, whatever, but they can't tell you the Ten Commandments. They can't tell you why they go to Mass, other than, well, we have to go or else we'll go to hell. I mean, no, you can go to Mass every day and go to hell. That's not how it works, And so once we understand and begin to live the faith with passion and conviction ourselves, then other people gonna look at us and say, I want what he has. I want what she has. There's something there that's so far beyond me that I want that. I want that joy. I want that peace. I want that love. I want to radiate that same love that this person's radiating. And it all comes rooted in the Eucharist and rooted in our faith.
That's awesome. And that it's interesting you say that, is living that life, because especially young people, they've heard all the platitudes. They want to see it in action. And that's where the young people that I worked with at Risk, it was after you start building that relationship, they're asking what makes you tick. You've never talked about God or anything, but you're living and walking as if you love this God that exists. And that's when the kids want to know what makes you tick, what gives you that joy, why do you do what you do, right? So we talk about faith, family, food, and fun here, and you've talked about having kids. So is there a dish that Dad prepares that is a family favorite that you cook up for the family, or?
Well, I'm actually, believe it or not, a pretty decent cook. Because one thing my mother did teach us, because I have two brothers and a sister, and I'm the oldest.
Okay.
So for us boys, she wanted to make sure that we knew the basics. We knew how to cook meals, simple meals. We knew how to do our laundry, so I guess we'd have to depend on anyone, when we were young men before we got married and all that, right? So it was awesome. And so, gosh, I have a meatloaf I do, which is pretty good. The fried chicken with a special seasoning blend that I like to use. There's a stuffed pork. I make my own apple chutney recipe that I stuff, and actually I put that on top, and I have a gorgonzola cheese and spinach mix with some other little surprise in there. I marinate the pork, slit it, stuff it, put the toothpicks in, and sear it off, put the toothpicks in and put it in the oven to finish, and then use the apple chutney on top, so, and I'm from the Caribbean. And the one thing I do miss, though, is the Caribbean food. Here in Oregon, we don't have the ingredients to cook those kinds of meals, because I was born in Barbados. I was born in the West Indies, so I grew up eating West Indian food, and which we used to get all the time, because I'm from New Jersey, the state of New Jersey originally, right across the river from New York. So and there's a huge Caribbean community in New York. So we used to get those food and that spices all the time. So I grew up on that. And now my mother, God rest her soul, she lived with us from 2006 to 2009, and she died in 2009. And my brother used to send her the ingredients. She used to make the food for us. And boy, I miss that so much. So, and one of the things I do, as I mentioned as a speaker, I do travel. So fortunately, I am able to go to cities and able to get some authentic Caribbean food when I'm traveling. So I'm grateful for that.
That's one of the beauties of living in Canada, because we've got such a diverse population, and
yeah, there's a huge Caribbean community in Canada.
Yeah, in Calgary here, it's not as big as places like Toronto, but you can still go find their family pepper sauce that they make, or it's I enjoy the variety of food that we have access to here in Calgary, and it's awesome. And there's a couple Caribbean restaurants here that I can go and enjoy the food. So one of the segments that we talk about is a lot of young men don't even know what a man is. So what advice do you give your 18-year-old self?
Yeah, it's the same advice I give my 18-year-old son. You know, he's actually 18. And what I started doing when he started becoming a young man, I would take him what we call guys' night out. So I would take him out and we would talk about things. You know, son, the culture says that women can be men and men can be women. That's not true, son. Here's the truth. Son, the culture says that marriage is something else other than one man and one woman. That's not true, son. Let me tell you the truth. And so we talk about issues, we talk about things. Why did I do that? Because first of all, I want him to be able to feel comfortable coming to me and talking to me about important issues and difficult things. Because where do young men go? They go to gangs, as we talked about earlier, or to rock stars, or to athletes, or to, those aren't the people you want to get advice from. They should be getting it from their father. And so I want them to come to me. I want him to feel comfortable trusting me. And so we do it over a meal. That's why we call it guys' night out. We go out to a restaurant and we have food, we have our favorite foods and we're eating and we're talking. Very relaxed atmosphere, no pressure. He can ask any question he wants. We'll talk about it. And then when we're done, we go see the Thor or the Avengers or, Black Panther or something like that, because we're men, it also acts as a beautiful bonding experience as well. And so for those young men out there, look, the culture is going to try to attract you and draw you away. Yes, some of you you've gone to church probably with your parents every Sunday. You've gone to youth group. You've gotten confirmed. But then you have to ask yourself, honestly, yes, I've received the sacraments, but am I actually living from my faith? Do the sacraments mean anything to me? Does going to Mass, what does that mean when I go to Mass? Who am I receiving there? Is there a disconnect between my faith and my everyday life? Honestly, ask yourself that. And then, before you abandon and leave the faith, which so many young people do these days, they go off to the colleges and universities, which used to be places that used to teach young people how to think. Now they're indoctrination centers that are teaching young people what to think. So I want to encourage young people to think for themselves deeply, intimately, personally, and not be afraid to engage the Lord and to seek truth, to seek objective truth. Don't let the culture lure you away. Don't let the culture, feed you from the dumpster. The church is trying to give you the richness and the beauty and the fullness of God's love and God's mercy. So which is not truth as a concept, but truth as a person. Because Jesus Christ says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And once you align yourself with what you know to be true and good and beautiful, now you are fully equipped to become the man of God that God created you to be.
That's awesome. Thank you. One other segment that we do, I ride with Jeff Cavins, and he talks about riding with your posse, so your go-to saints. Who would be your top go-to saints that you walk with every day?
Well, for me, of course, it'd be the deacon saints, right? So St. Vincent, Ephraim, the deacon from the Easter Rite, who's also a doctor of the church, Lawrence, the martyr, Francis of Assisi, right? Who's a lot of people don't realize he was a permanent deacon. He was never a priest.
Oh, wow.
And of course, Stephen, the proto-martyr, the first martyr of the church and actually apostles, was a deacon. And so those would be my posse, if you will. I remember a very poignant moment for me during my ordination was during the Litany of the Saints, where you lie face down on the marble at the altar, and they're praying. Saint Augustine, pray for us. Saint John the Baptist, pray for us. And when they got to the deacon saints, I remember like tearing up and thinking to myself, who am I to walk in the footsteps of these great, humble, loyal sons of God, these great deacons, and I'm like, man, when I get up off this floor, I'm going to be ordained. I'm going to enter into that brotherhood. I'm going to enter into that fraternity with them. Boy, I've got an obligation and responsibility to live up, to the high bar that those guys set, because all of those guys are where we hope to be one day with God in heaven. Right. So I'll still be a deacon in heaven because, deacon ordination is one of the three sacraments that leaves a permanent mark on the soul, an indelible mark or a character that can never be removed. The other ones are baptism and confirmation. And so I don't know how I'm going to be a deacon in heaven. I have no clue, but I'm looking forward to really fulfilling my diaconal ministry here on earth the way God needs me to be, and then also living that fully with him in heaven.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for visiting us in the pub today. Thank you for your time. I pray that the border opens one day and I'll be able to make one of the meetings at CMLA where we can sit and have a coffee together and a visit. And so the origin of the word whiskey is a Gaelic word called Ishkabaha, which means water of life. And my prayer is that you continue to lead many souls to the true water of life. And thank you for all you do for the men of North America.
Thank you. And keep up the great work you're doing there in Canada as well. And I hope to be back up there soon. I mean, my last trip, as a matter of fact, was to Lloydminster.
Oh, wow.
That was my last trip to Canada before COVID and everything shut down. So I hope to be back one day soon.
We will be riding our motorcycles through there as we escort the bishop for the military back to Ottawa on our road trip this year on our motorcycles. So that's
wonderful.
Awesome.
Outstanding.
I hope you have enjoyed this episode of A Dram with Friends. Like and subscribe. Go to all podcast platforms to look for it on podcast, or go to godsquad.ca to support our mission.